Welcome to Horticulture, where a group of extension professionals and plant people talk about the business, production, and joy of planting seeds and helping them grow. Join us as we explore the culture of horticulture. Hello and welcome. It is sunny outside. I am a houseplant who is getting their vitamin D today, and I'm drinking my water, and I'm just a houseplant with feelings today. So welcome to my podcast. But I also have some other great people here with me today. So how's everybody feeling?
Good.
Pretty good. Like the sunshine.
Yeah.
At least at the
Something
point of
about
recording, it's a beautiful day today in Kentucky. We don't know what it's going to look like in a couple of weeks when this actually airs, but today it's beautiful and we're in good moods. All the good moods.
What is I feel like every season has like a smell that goes along with it. That you're like, when you smell it, you're like, oh, that is springtime. That is summer. What is
Cut grass.
What do you smell that says it's spring to you?
For me, it's
cut
always
grass,
the lawn.
especially as you mention it now. I can't stop imagining the smell of cut
It's
grass.
very powerful, yeah.
See, that's my summer. Like
that's my summer too.
That's my summer
I've
smell.
my lawn's been mowed 3 times already in the back because it's real sunny.
Wow.
So there's only one spot around my raised beds that has a little bit of excess. It gets sort of a trap area that captures a little bit of extra fertility, and it has adequate moisture. And it's always 90% ahead of all the rest of my lawn that does not get that amount of nutrients and water. So, yeah.
What about you,
Brett? It needs to be a garden.
Yeah.
We have some hyacinth out, and that smells nice and springy. But I would say that I associate that kind of manure-y mulch smell. You see the landscaping crews and people out spreading mulch, and actually love the smell of that.
I also love the smell of fresh mulch.
It smells like fertility. Smells like the
fresh earth, just
harbinger of a future harvest. I don't know what it is, but it's like baking bread. It's just like a human sets off something human in me.
There's something about that kind of, when it's like kind of partially aged mulch, where it's got like a little bit of like the ammonia or whatever.
Yeah.
I do that. Even when it's kind of like acrid.
I want it to stink a little bit.
Right?
Yeah.
My father worked at a sawmill, and he always smelled like fresh mulch because for many, many years he worked at a small sawmill, and he always, was covered in shavings. But he always had the most distinctive smell, and every time I smell mulch, it's like my father walking through the door. It was a very similar smell, so it triggers me every single time. It's good stuff, and I love the smell of a good hardwood mulch, and that's what I'm associating. Yeah, that's a good one, Brett.
I love that. Yeah, I was gonna say like the same bread, because I've got I've been experimenting with getting some stem length on hyacinths, and I had extras left over that I just like potted up, and so I have one set in my office and one set at the kitchen at home, and it's just like you walk in and it's just spring to me. Like that is Easter egg hunts. That is everything about that. But yeah, mulch. When I worked at the Arboretum, all we did was mulch, and I never got sick of the smell. Like there's something about it. So,
did you have any luck on the stem length hyacinth thing?
They're coming up. So far, we're looking promising, but I don't want to say it. I've had to put like flip trays, those trays that just the plastic trays that are like a netted bottom. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? They're not like a solid bottom tray. They just kind of like X's on the bottom to hold. And I had to put some of those across my big crates for the hyacinths because the cat was laying in them because it's nice and warm in the greenhouse. So there's probably some that have been smushed and are no good, but I don't know. It looks promising. I'm just now starting to get flower buds, and I've got some good. They're coming up tall, so we'll find out.
Yeah, ours are all loescents, not very good.
Right? Why loescents, not hyacinths?
They're more vertically challenged,
but they do smell really good.
Yes, they do.
Our neighbor was like, "What's that good smell?" And I was like, "Why are you sound so surprised that there's good smells coming from around our house?"
It's the bread.
Every time I'm there's like good food smells happening.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, good food smells.
You guys turn over a new leaf. It smells great over here.
Better than the sewage.
We are honestly. Ray and Josh should have gone last because they have a perfect segue into what we're talking about today, which is some turf and some perennial beds. So if you're like, I don't care about my lawn, still listen to this episode because we've got some good stuff for you. And so where we talked about kind of prepping garden areas before, we're going to talk about how you're managing some of those perennial plantings, which includes turf. Unfortunately for me and Josh, who also hate turf, but we love that you love it, and we're here for you. And
I'm going to just preemptively defend my boy Ray and all the
Am I
lawn
the
lovers.
representative of turf lovers?
I said we support you. It's our
Okay,
personal
well, that's
choice.
not what goes on behind closed doors. You
That's
guys
not
don't
what
know.
I heard.
Alexis is holding us all hostage. I'm blinking twice to let you know that
Yes.
she is threatening
Okay,
all
well,
this.
this isn't
I wouldn't say I
videoed,
hate
so you
it.
have
I
no
would-
proof. Okay,
I'm tapping out
I wouldn't say
SOS
I
right
hate
now.
turf. I would just say I love that for you.
Yeah, exactly. I love that for you. That's what I'm saying.
Like the other Alexis shit. Or no, Alexis, whatever her name is. Schitt's Creek. Schitt's the show Schitt's Creek. That's not her name though. That's the name of the
Rose,
city.
Alexis Rose.
Rose. That's right.
Close.
I was like,
Yeah,
excuse
we're
me,
so close.
sir.
I didn't know where we were going with this, yo.
I'm
But okay, I'm pulling us back here. So my dad was always he always had the most immaculate lawn in his
Good for him.
neighborhood, and while we had different opinions on that, and obviously we most of our lawn is not lawn anymore, but I do think for a lot of folks out there, when they think of landscaping and they think of ornamental management of plants around their house, the lawn is a big part of that.
Yeah.
That there are the border edges that are maybe like the trim pieces in your house, but most of the walls that get painted in your house, the equivalent out there in the ground is the lawn. And so I think it is important to a lot of people. And I think while in the dyed in the wool sustainable ag horticulture community, lawns do not hold a lot of cachet. I think that they're a really important part of American horticulture, the American horticulture industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are people who just legitimately enjoy them. And it's the same way there's people who are all about the hardwood floors in their house, and there's people who are all about carpets. Some people like to be able to go out there and walk around in the beautiful lawn, or play with their dogs, or play a big game of baseball with their kids or something. So
They're
would
just
like
much
to
more
hear.
devoted than me. Okay,
Yeah.
I am much
want their
much
kitchen
lazier.
carpeted. It's fine.
Yeah.
I like that for them.
I cannot use a bathroom that's not carpeted.
I understand.
That's bold. That's very bold, bro.
Very classic
bold.
traditional take from the 70s.
It smells of
If anybody
spring.
is gagging right now, I'm there with you. Just imagining. Felt, same, all of that. Yeah.
Just a point of clarification here. I love the functionality of a lawn, but
Totally.
I'm not one of those that puts a lot of input into it. I'm one of those.
Ray's defending himself.
No, I don't put I put a minimal amount of input in. I try to strategize and make every input count, because lawns are one of those interesting things. And we're talking lawn and landscape today. We're talking about a variety of things because it's a good spring topic. Everything's waking up and beginning to grow, and that includes your lawn. Hopefully it's coming out of the wintertime, but like a lot of people, I like something green out there. I think a lot of people do, but for the most part in my county, when homeowners call, by far the vast majority of people that call into the office are people that are on that minimal lawn maintenance schedule. In other words, they don't have irrigation, they don't have a really sophisticated herbicide schedule, and they don't do top shelf maintenance. That's not most of the calls that I get into the local extension office by volume. It's most of the people that just kind of want to know the basics, and we do get a lot of weed calls and things like that. And this is dandelion season. This is when we'll herbicide questions and options, and that leads to other discussions on overall lawn health. But yeah, I think most people, they want it to look nice in front of their homes, and usually nice equates itself to like uniformity and some kind of green out there, whether it's the same type of grass or not. They really don't care as long as it's green. When they mow it,
Totally.
that's fine. That's most of the types of people that I work with. But on the other end of that spectrum, you'll have like athletic field managers that not only does it have to look nice, it has to be extremely functional and it has to be uniform from a safety standpoint. So there's in the turf industry, you can come at it from so many different angles, but the volume of my calls is for homeowners that do the minimal maintenance, and that's
Yeah.
kind of where I'm at personally on home lawns. Yeah.
Well, there, and as Brett pointed out, there is a very critical function to
Yeah.
that lawn
Mhm.
section, right? It's a permeable area. Water can infiltrate, so you're not getting like
Mhm.
runoff and things like that, as you would compared to some kind of gray infrastructure like concrete.
Sure.
It's soft. It can be walked upon and moved around, and you can't walk through an oak tree or through a shrub, but you can have a garden party, and that's going to be on a lawn. And it has that aesthetic. I mean, we like seeing green spaces that we can maneuver in. It gives those kind of suburban lawns all aggregated together, gives kind of a little park like aesthetic to our residential
Mhm.
areas.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
so Ray, if I'm at the lawn car wash and there I have the Ray special, which is kind of minimal inputs, and then there's the works. How is that different? You know, the top package of everything you can possibly throw at a lawn versus what you do. What are the things that you tend to do, and then what are some of the things that are available that you tend to not engage with as much?
Usually, when I talk to homeowners, I approach it from a low input angle, meaning we start with grass selection first. Very, very important. For the most part, in most scenarios for homeowners, it really starts with grass selection. If you want to do the absolute least maintenance in most scenario, and you want a green lawn year round, there are some folks that have warm season. They don't mind a warm season lawn like Zoysia grass or Bermuda. We do have native Bermuda in Kentucky, and we have all the introduced turf top Bermudas, but they stay dormant, the half of the year round, just about. But they have some very great attributes. But that's not the typical case in Kentucky. So I start with discussing with homeowners. I find out what type of lawn they have or what type of lawn that they want. And in
Mm.
most scenarios, it's a turf top fescue that I recommend because it has the least maintenance. It's not perfect, but it's very well developed varieties, very good varieties that have pretty good drought tolerance when compared to something like a bluegrass. It has pretty good wear resistance, and it doesn't develop thatch nearly as bad because and that's a pro and a con for turf top fescues, which were all derived from Kentucky 31 tall fescue, which I don't see much in lawns anymore because it clumps. But I guess that's the pro and the con for turf fescues, is that they don't form a lot of thatch because they don't have this, spreading mechanism, rhizomes and stolons like some of the other grasses do. But that's also a con because you have to fill in bare spots. But I
Mhm.
start with a Brett a discussion on, well, what's your lawn? What do you want it to do? What's the function of the lawn? How much traffic is it going to be irrigated? And 9 times out of 10, we end up going with a turf top fescue. That's the first thing that you start with when discussing how much maintenance do you want to do. Because if you're talking about something like bluegrass, you may start thinking about irrigation. You may start thinking about, when you get so many years down the road, a dethatching operation. It involves different considerations for the different types of lawn grasses. So low maintenance is tall fescue for me in a lot of scenarios. It's not for every scenario, but most scenarios. It begins there, Brett, really, for, if you're like me and you want to kind of do minimal inputs. Yeah.
And I mean, what's your reasoning for doing the minimal inputs besides the? I mean, I know you mentioned some of them already, but
Yeah.
I mean, and if people are interested in minimal inputs versus other types of things, do they tend to emphasize certain things throughout that? Because I mean, some people like doing this almost as like a hobby, where it's like
Yeah.
I want it to
Mhm.
be hands
Mhm.
on. I don't want it
And
to
I,
be
and I
low
do
maintenance.
work with some homeowners that are super passionate, and they do a higher level of inputs equal one thing to me, and that's a higher level of uniformity. That's a lower level of weeds and other undesirable grasses, and that's what it boils down to. Really, what's your objectives? And we have to kind of feel our way through that as county extension agents, finding out what folks is, what their expectations are. Obviously, the higher the expectations, the more inputs you're going to have to put into a lawn area. Now, folks that are doing the next thing I ask is, are you going to be working with other external companies, or are you going to be doing this yourself? And if they're going to be doing it themselves and it's more like a hobby, then we discuss, like, for example, in the fall, instead of doing one application, the best time to apply fertilizer to a cool season lawn grass in Kentucky is in the fall. September, October, you can make one application. That's perfectly fine. But if you have like an irrigated lawn area and you're doing a high level of input, you can break that up into 2, 3, 4 applications and sort of micro dose the lawn to get a better effect and take advantage of inputs like the irrigation and have a really uniform, super thick lawn. But it's all about your expectations for the area. For me, my expectation is I have a 10-year-old, so I want a nice area out back that stays green for him to play. Right now,
Mm.
I'm experimenting with adding some clover back into the lawn. I know the wear resistance is not going to be great. He has friends over a lot, and I'm just going to kind of see how it goes. But I have thin soils in the back of my lawn with a mixture of some cool season fescue. But I'm going to see how that goes, to see how the clover holds up with 6 or 7, 10, 12, 13 year olds running around all summer back there, and see if I can't make a go of that, because it's something that I've been interested in trying. I know we've talked about that on other podcasts or touch bases briefly, but yeah, lawns are one of those things. Higher expectations, the higher the inputs, and it also depends on things like neighborhood regulations and laws governing front lawn areas. Sometimes there's a baseline of expectation that you have to maintain as far as weeds go, like dandelions and things like that. I understand that, and that's important to find out too. But yeah, you can put a lot of money and time into lawns if it's your passion and it's your hobby, and if you're especially if you're working with companies. But you don't have to do that. You can do just simple things like increase your mowing height,
Mhm.
fertilizing in the fall, put no fertilizer down in the spring, which could lead to excess disease problems. You could do some of those things that are pretty basic and have good results without a lot of additional inputs, depending on some other things.
Right. I know I use a lot for those people who've got, questions or kind of want our visual people. I like a good calendar. So we have something, we'll put it in the show notes, a turf care calendar for cool season lawns in Kentucky. And so those of you who are not in Kentucky, depending if you're in a similar zone as we are, you still might be able to look at this a little bit and go off of it. But it gives you every month and just kind of like bars of saying, like, when do you need to aerify if that's what you need to do, when do you need to spray, when do you need to put pre-emergent down, those types of things. And I really like that. And so it all stems kind of off of what we always talk about, which is like soil tests as far as liming and things like that go. But it's really helpful, I think, to just get a general idea of, okay, in May I need to start thinking about this.
Yeah.
And kind of, I don't know, I like that, like grub control. Like, I've had a lot of questions lately. People are having mole troubles. That's very normal in the springtime, that you've got moles, and everybody just shook their head like, yes, who's listening, that they've got moles. And so they immediately want to treat for grubs, which I always say, you only need to treat for grubs if you can pull your turf up like a carpet. Like, if you can grab a hold of it and pull it up like an area rug, then you need to treat for grubs. Otherwise, those moles are eating a lot of different things, earthworms, spiders, all kinds of stuff. But a lot of people are wanting to treat for them now. And actually, that's something that you wait if you do need to have like a
Hmm.
curative approach, and you do that in like August. And so a lot of people don't know that. And that's what's great about this calendar. So we'll link that in the show notes if you're interested in that.
Yeah, that's my favorite resource, Alexis, is that AGR 55, the turf care calendar. It's graphical and it kind of distills down hundreds of pages of information into one little quick reference chart.
Mhm.
And it's just an awesome place to start in Kentucky, specifically. And if you're not in Kentucky, you can contact your local extension service. I know several other extension universities have a version of this, but I love the one that we have. It's been recently revised and it's very handy. And you'll look on there, and if you're in Kentucky, you'll notice that there is certain things. I guess, Alexis, what does your chart say? I mean, there's certain things that you can be doing this time of year. It's actually the second best time of year to put down some seed. By far, the fall is the best, but when does that start, Alexis, according to your chart?
So, according to this chart for renovation and an establishment of seed, you're looking at mid-February through mid-April as the second
Yeah.
best time to
We're
do
kind of
that.
right in the middle of that. And
Mhm.
if you're a homeowner, and that's probably the most common question I get this time of year. People have noticed that maybe it was dry last year and their lawn has thinned out some. Well, that tells me one thing automatically. If your lawn got thin like the previous year due to drought or whatever factors, anytime sunlight hits the soil, something's going to grow there. And in most cases, it's undesirable species like crabgrass is the most common. Crabgrass is an annual that's going to grow. If your lawn gets thin, you're going to get things like crabgrass, dandelion, stuff like that that's going to grow. But you'll look at a chart like this and you can see that you can seed this time of year. If you can get your hands on one, my number one recommendation is to use a lawn slit seeder. And it looks like
Hmm.
it's basically a small no-till drill for lawns. They're 18 to 24 inches wide. They're heavy because they have a motor on them. They cut little slits and drop the seed very precisely into your lawn, and you can use those to great effect this time of year. In fact, it's the number one thing you can do to thicken your lawn if it's just a thin lawn, because if you thicken your lawn, and now's a good time to do that, to use a slit seeder specifically, if you thicken your lawn, that's going to really reduce your need later on down the road, years down the road, to do weed control. Because if you have a thick lawn, it's going to shade the soil, it's going to cool the soil, and you're not going to get weed seeds germinating at the rate that you otherwise would. So number one thing this time of year is thicken your lawn, whether it's with if you're very fortunate, you can get your hands on a lawn slit seeder. And if you can't get your hands on that, if it's a small area, you can use a hard rake, scruff up the soil an inch or two deep, throw down your lawn seed, and then walk or roll that in so that you have good seed to soil contact. And if it's a pretty good sized little area, you can even straw it or mulch it to make sure that there's some moisture there for the grass seed to germinate. But that's one of the common things going on right now is lawn patching, lawn renovating. Slit seeders are being used. Typically, we don't fertilize in a low maintenance schedule. We're not fertilizing this time of year because that can cause some issues going forward. Usually I find that you have weeds have a greater response this time of year than does your lawn grass. And
Weed
it
and
also may,
feeds should not be allowed. I mean,
yeah,
I think they're
yeah.
good in like southern areas, but in our
Hmm.
areas,
Give me
I
the weed, but not the feed.
highly
Yes.
discourage weed and
Yeah.
feed in Kentucky.
Yeah.
So like don't don't be doing that.
If you're in a lawn that has a high maintenance schedule, which is not typical of the people that I work with, there's some cases you can make for fertilizing this time of year lightly, but I usually don't recommend it for, like I said, over 95% of the folks that's just doing a low input lawn care kind of maintenance schedule, because you're going to cause issues like brown patch, which is one of the only diseases that really affect turf top fescues that we worry about in Kentucky. It's going to cause issues down the road, such as that. You're going to have lush growth. You're going to have to mow more often. And that goes against sort of the low input, kind of trying to reduce your time and inputs. That kind of goes against that if you're fertilizing this time of year. So resist the urge to do that. It's by far to do that better to do that in the fall. But there are some things that you're doing, such as the seeding, like I said, that's pretty important this time of year. Not only that, but if you've had trouble with thin lawn and crabgrass in the past. Crabgrass is an annual, and if it went to seed, you're going to have it again this year. I think Alexis isn't on that revised chart. It's right about now. You can start to put down pre-emergent crabgrass controls.
Yes, yeah.
That should
Now,
be on
and
that chart.
it is on this chart. I will say that this is applicable to, I think, landscape beds, whatever you're dealing with. That charts are great because they remind you to be looking for things. We have
Hmm.
chart spray guides for apples. We have all these different guides, and they tell you what to look for. But the way our climate has been changing, our spring is really early in this area this year. Looking at your local soil temperatures or your local indicator plants are going to be, I would say, more important. So use these
Yeah.
guides as references to be like, oh, I need to be checking for this.
Hmm.
But they're not going to be perfect because you may have an early spring or a late spring. So for crabgrass, I've always heard when the forsythia are blooming. Ray, is that something that you've
That's still a pretty
experienced?
good rule of thumb. Crabgrass controls for homeowners, it used to be only for commercial operators, But Josh mentioned like polymer coatings. We were having a discussion earlier. That has now trickled down to homeowners in that most of the pre-emergent crabgrass controls, if you get them on now, it's better to get on a little early than a little late.
Mhm.
The
Mm-hmm.
polymer coatings are so good that there's a high tolerance. They'll lay there and then they'll do their job for weeks at a time. So if you had to err on the side of caution, do that early rather than wait too late. But I always use the forsythia as an indicator. Yeah, Alexis.
But like
But if it's
soil
an early,
temperatures, yeah, can be
yeah,
used when you're
yeah,
seeding,
yes,
just about
hmm,
anything. I talked about that today on the radio, but looking at, we have these local mesonet stations where every county you can look at the soil temperature for the top, inch or the top 5 inches or 8 inches. And that sounds crazy, but if you're going to spend a lot of time and money on putting down seed or applying a pre-emergent or something like that, don't waste it. Look at, okay, soil temperature is 53 degrees. It's time for me to put this down.
hmm,
And that's just a quick thing you can pull up. I think there's an app now as well. So,
yeah,
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 well, one of the features of those kind of slow release polymerized, products is that the release rate is kind of contingent on temperature. It starts
yeah,
releasing quicker as it warms up, so it kind of
yeah,
scales with you. It's
yeah. It's
basically
very good.
biological, like the biology is breaking it down when it's warming up, so it kind of
It's
works
kind of
with
like
you.
Osmocote. Yeah, almost
Yeah,
like
like if you apply
Osmocote's.
it a
Yeah,
little quote unquote early and it stays cool, it's going to
it's
stay there
fine.
and be ready
Yeah.
as it warms up.
Yeah, but there's things like that in the home lawns that you can do now. You can start to mow as the daytime temperatures get consistently above 50 degrees. If you are one that feel like that you need to use a broadleaf herbicide, you'll notice that dandelions are active now, very active in Kentucky. You have lots of, we were just talking about, I mean, clover may or may not be desirable to you depending on your specific situation. So a lot of the spring weeds that we're seeing now are actively growing, and anytime there's adequate moisture and the weeds are actively growing, it's not a bad time that if you're choosing to do a broadleaf chemical control to go ahead and spray as long as the temperature is consistently up. That's the two conditions that need to be met is adequate moisture and the weeds are actively growing. That's usually a good time to spray those. So some of that you can even, now's a good time to start some of those controls if you feel like you need to do that. So yeah, that's what's going on in lawns, but lawns are all about expectations. And it's interesting that over time, I have worked with more people that are interested in things like mixed clover lawns or alternative
Mhm.
lawns or low growing lawns. Just lawns are starting to change a little bit more interest in warm season grasses. One of you guys mentioned that because we have these, extended dry periods, hot periods in the summer, or maybe extended wet period in some cases, but the hotter, drier summers in some cases have led people to be more interested in the warm season grasses, more of the Bermuda type, which you can mow those low. They're completely different. They do their best growing in the hot summer months. You can mow those
Mhm.
low, and they have extreme wear tolerance.
Yeah.
They're
And
great.
like
They're soft. Yeah, a
I
lot
was
of
just
good
gonna say
qualities.
for reference, like you would mow optimally tall fescue at 2.5 to 4 inches, but Bermuda is 1 to 1.5. So it's like a kind of tighter lawn. And like Ray said, it came from farther south, the Bermuda area. That's like the big
Yeah.
grass where I come from is Bermuda.
Oh yeah, Bermuda is. I mean, like, is so dense and so thick. It feels like a carpet. It's sometimes hard to tell just glancing at if it's artificial or if it's real. It's that uniform and it spreads. It fills in, because the way that it actually spreads. It's just the opposite of fescue, in that it does fill in holes very well. And zoysia grass is a little bit different. It's more coarse and open, but still it has the same warm season qualities. But for the most part, for most of you guys listening, if you're in Kentucky, you probably have a cool season grass lawn. Some of you guys may have an older lawn that is bluegrass, and that's treated a little bit differently, as I mentioned before. It's just a little bit different on the bluegrass end, but I still run into folks that do have lawns either seeded or sodded into bluegrass, and there's options there for working with those. But it all boils down to, once again, expectations, and how that lawn area is being used, because it has to be functional to me. In some areas down next to my garden, as long as it's green and I can walk on it without getting mud on my shoes, guess what? Henbit is a desirable species to me down there, dead nettle henbit, because it
Hmm.
keeps my shoes from getting muddy, because that's my expectations of that area. And I love to watch the bees work, the clover and the henbit on down there. And there's violets and all sorts of things that I don't mind being down next to my garden. So yeah, all about expectations.
Was I think one of the common things that we see is that people will often have like a big area of lawn, and then around the edges there's some sort of landscaping.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Our lawn actually is kind of the opposite. We actually use the lawn as the edging around, so that there's like a
That's a neat
path.
effect. That's a really
Yeah.
cool effect.
Well, and
Yeah.
you can
It's
maneuver around those spaces so much better.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can clean up the edges really easily by just running a lawnmower through it,
Hmm.
and as opposed to the kind of the opposite where it's like, oh, my lawn is cut, but then I have to go in through and weed. And so anyway, but I think that's another component as I think about like the landscapes around homes and around our built environments. We have
Hmm.
the lawn as part of it, but the other part of it is the that those perennialized and or maybe some annual and bulb beds mixed in. And this is now it's also a time of year that we can do some interventions there as far as planning and keeping things fresh, or maybe adding mulch. And so maybe we talk about that for just a little bit too.
Oh,
Totally.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's lots going on.
I'm
Yeah.
dealing with that. I was actually just talking to a specialist about I've got perennial rows that I've mulched and try and the we've talked about how the weeds kill me because I was in converted pasture and because I didn't take my time to make sure I prepped that area well. So I'm dealing with the consequences now. But I've got some clover that, naturally clover often comes in after you terminate pasture area. And even though I've been mulching for a couple of years now, I swear overnight it happens. And now I know why those clients that come in. And so they're like,
Now you
it
know.
just happened. I never even realized. And I, judge them silently because I'm like, you should have been paying attention. Well, it happened to me. And I've got this clover that's creeping in my broadleaf perennials. And it's like, what am I going to do? Because at this point, it's much too large of an area to like just dig up by hand, which is usually what I recommend. So, talking with a specialist on what my options are there, they're not good. So, there's that. So, prep your area good the first time. But yeah, getting mulch down and smelling all those good smells early is huge.
Do you guys have any beds? I know it's a big operation. It's not done every year, but any of you guys ever exchange the old mulch with new mulch and like completely pulled out the old mulch? I
Mm.
mean, I don't do that. I don't do that very often at all, but sometimes I do to keep it from stacking up too tall. The mulch
Yeah.
around plants.
I only ever really remember adding, and I mean,
Yeah.
usually in the landscape kind of areas, it was like we were adding that already
Hmm.
kind of aged mulch, and so
Yeah.
it kind of was already like essentially feels like soil at that point, and then you're
Yeah.
just adding
Yeah.
on top of that to give it like, like that dark aged mulch.
Hot
This
press it.
I'm thinking in terms of like I was helping prepare for this like society garden tour, and that dark backdrop makes everything that's going to
Oh,
come up really
looks
pop. Yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
Hmm.
But the only time I've ever had to pull stuff, and I was trying to think back why I would have done that, and I think it's like the cypress or the pine bark nuggets that really don't break down.
Hmm.
That they start to just break down enough and leach out of color that they don't look good, and they just want
Right.
to pile up, and they get too thick, and then it causes some unsavory conditions with like the roots wanting to grow up into there. But hardwood mulch, I can't remember a time having pulled hardwood mulch
Hmm.
completely out because, like you said, Brett, it sort of or I think you said it, Josh. It sort of composts itself because it's fine enough and microbes
Hmm.
can act on it. But it's the
Mhm.
things that have all of the compounds in it that doesn't let it break down. That's why I
Yeah.
like those types of mulch. But then again, they just hang around forever and they finally bleach out. They don't look good and I have to pull them out and then exchange that. So I guess cleaning out beds and stuff this time of year. How
Yeah.
about like removing like plant parts and stuff? Any of you guys doing anything of that?
Oh, yeah, I
Kind
mean,
of.
it is a good time to prune after it's freezing, like kind of late winter, early spring, you can prune.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, yeah, that to me is one of the nice things about spring is some of these things where you can get outdoors. It's not,
Hmm.
seating flats inside or making a plan inside. It's like, hey, the weather's starting to get nice. What can I actually
Mm-hmm.
physically do
Yeah.
outside? And it's
Yeah,
things like
I
pruning.
would say with that cleaning up, just like think about where you're cleaning up, and we recently have an episode coming out or has come out already about like pollinator gardens and butterfly gardens. So a lot of them are still kind of asleep at this point, and so they're just starting to emerge. If you've got things with hollow stems, especially. And so leaving those in until about, the beginning of April, mid March to April, will give them time to kind of emerge and get through that. Some things that are, if they're, really solid stems and you're just kind of cutting it back to, 8 inches or a foot tall or something, you're not going to bother anything. You can get, any of that damaged dead wood out of the way. And usually by now all of your seed heads are gone, but just something to think about where we like sanitizing as far as getting things cleaned up and looking nice, but if your goal is like pollinator habitat, to kind of keep that in mind. And if it's not, that's totally fine, and you're going to supply a lot of nectar and great things throughout the season.
And
So,
Alexis, I don't want to say this wrong. I always have to think about it, even though we've said it for years and taught it for years. The rule of thumb for based on bloom period with pruning, if it
mm,
blooms early,
mhm.
I forget the publication that comes from, but if it blooms really early, prune, what is it, after blooming? And if
Mhm.
it's a late bloomer, you can prune early. The main thing is no.
Don't prune out your flower buds.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it's based on timing, whether it's a really
Mhm.
early bloom or a later season bloom. If in
Right.
doubt, give us a call and we can give you a list of plants that's pretty typical in landscapes based on
Hydrangeas
that
are
prune.
like the thing that people mess up the most, and it's because they're difficult and there are so many kinds of them. So if
The
you've
old
messed this
fashioned ones
up,
are difficult.
no
The new ones
judgment.
are
I
easy.
cannot keep them straight. I have a table that I pull up,
Yeah, I do too. I
and
do too.
maybe we'll put a link in there. But if you've had
Yeah.
trouble getting your hydrangea to bloom, so let's say, the plant is beautiful, you protected it during the frost, things like that, and you prune it, and it's not blooming, or you only get one or two blooms, it could be because you're pruning at the wrong time and you're just literally removing those
It's
flower buds.
probably the
Mhm.
old-fashioned hydrangeas. I love the new ones because I've cut those back to
They bloom
within,
on new and old wood.
well-established.
Yeah.
Yeah, new and old, and there's almost I mean, they're much more bulletproof than the old ones were so easy with winter kill and improper pruning to really
Mhm.
miss entire bloom seasons, but the new
Mhm.
ones, when they get unwieldy, I'll just prune those to 15 to 18 inches if they were otherwise healthy and they've been established 4 or 5 years. I'll prune them back and they'll just grow right back and have the most beautiful blooms the same year, the PGs
Oh
and all the
man, I
new
have a
tops.
friend who has these big, I think they're macrophylla, so big, tall hydrangeas, like 12-foot tall, like essentially like mini trees now. And she hacked them back, and they're covering her windows, and she has a lot of indoor plants, so it's really killing her. And so she had, cut them back, tried to thin them out, and eventually she was just mad. And they're probably 10 to 15-year-old mini trees at this point, large shrubs. And she took a chainsaw and cut those suckers back to about, I don't know, 3 foot tall, if that. Those things sprang up. They were beautiful the next
Yeah.
year, but they had a really established root system.
Yeah.
They had
They
been
had all
well
that
made,
energy.
cared for. It's not the answer to everything, but man, they were stunning this year. And she was like, I thought I killed him and I was kind of glad. So
The point is, make sure that you know what type of hydrangea you have before you do that,
yeah.
because the newer types, the ever blooming types, I guess is a common term for that.
Yeah.
Make sure it's an ever blooming because some of the old fashioned types will not come back like that the same, or if they do come back, it's going to take 2 year cycle. The first year they're going to regrow vegetatively. Second year they'll bloom if nothing else happens to the plant. But it's a good time to do some of that pruning.
Mhm. You can
Trees, we
also
get this.
move things, right? You can
Yeah,
transplant.
yeah. Mhm. Mhm.
So
I mean,
one,
basically before you get new growth, but after the ground's
dormancy.
thawed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One that was actually something that came up. If you have an area that, when I was talking to the specialist about, like, I don't know what to do. I got this bad clover and I don't want to kill all my other, all my good plants, or all my like on purpose plants, I should say. And it was, well, do you have another area you can move them? A lot of the time your plants need divided anyways to stay healthy. You can double the amount of plants you have, or more, or you can give them away to friends, and you can have a little mini plant sale or plant giveaway trade thing going on, so that has a community aspect to it. But if you could move those, then you can renovate that old area without risking that. And it was like, duh. And that just
Mhm.
seems, I think, first, in some cases, if it got away from you, there's always that option. And I think that's really a cool idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I
true,
would
man.
say a couple other things that maybe, just in case you've forgotten to, removing any kind of winter protection, or any of those things that are still out there. It's also, I think, recommended to remove staking on young trees, to give
Yes.
them the opportunity to kind of wobble around and grow without
Yeah.
girdling them.
Make stronger trees if they have room to kind of naturally blow in the breeze,
Right,
literally.
right.
Stronger fibers in the
Yeah,
in the tree
I
itself.
remember learning that in an arborism class about how critical it was for trees to be able to kind of be blown around by the wind, and when they're really hardcore staked down or guying, I believe is one of the terms,
Mm-hmm.
that it doesn't give them that opportunity, and they don't develop as strong as kind of trees that get to wiggle.
Mm-hmm. They don't
Yeah.
lay down that wood.
Yeah. Speaking of trees, I guess it's also a good time to remove tree wrap. That's very important for
Hmm.
thin skinned trees like maples that you may
Cherries.
have put wrap on there. Yeah, cherries, all of those that you may have wanted to provide some winter protection for. Go ahead and pull off, especially the close wraps that are on there. You don't need to leave those on in the summer. And if you're doing any kind of maintenance pruning on trees like maple trees, and we get this number one question with tree pruning is they're like, but what if the tree bleeds? And generally, if the sap is coming up this time of year, the days are getting longer and warmer, you're going to get some sap production out of trees that you if you have to do a little maintenance pruning, that's perfectly fine. Just don't park your car under there. That'll lead to a less than desirable situation. But you can do I love to prune, like maintenance pruning on trees this time of year, because the limbs, you can actually look up into the canopy of the tree. The weather's nicer, it's not in
Mm.
full leaf, so you can actually see the structure of the tree to to do the pruning that you need to do. If it's maintenance pruning, not deadheading, we're not even going to get into that, or hat racking, or we're not talking about that. Just general maintenance pruning on, let's say, a maple tree. Great time of year to do that, and the limbs are so much lighter in weight due to them not having the leaves on there. So it's a good time of year to do some of those operations in your landscape. If you have a tree with an errant limb, go ahead and get that done before full leaf.
I had never heard that term hat racking before, but I looked it up and it doesn't seem like it's something you're supposed to do. But
No,
it
no.
makes the tree look like a hat rack. Or I mean,
Yes.
if I saw a tree like that, I'd be like, man, somebody butchered that thing.
Tree tree
But
tree
hat racking,
topping, I guess.
okay, cool.
Hat racking is the precursor to what we just call tree topping now. And that's a very undesirable situation that we'll have a total podcast on sometime, and we'll just
Don't
get
top
into
your
that.
trees.
What
Don't top
I
your
Don't
trees.
do it.
the first
Don't
thing
do
I
it.
hit was like a publication from the government of Glendale, California, and it says hat racking is not an acceptable pruning practice.
No, no. It's an older term, but it's still one that's very appropriate. Yeah. Yeah, I like that
Last
term.
year, I pruned a little more aggressively on a couple of the old dogwoods we have,
Mhm.
Mm.
and they bled. Uh, and
He says with
You
delight.
say that with
Right?
intrepidation
Like,
or delight.
I'm scared a little bit. I
no,
want to take the
I
fall.
didn't enjoy it. I wept as it wept.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I also I got that like secondary fungus thing, the orange stuff that sometimes is
Mm-hmm.
called deer barf or deer vomit,
Mm-hmm.
because that's like
Like,
mythologically, like, I guess that people thought a deer barfed on the tree or something.
so you had a lot
There's
going
also
on, Brett.
dog vomit fungus, but it grows on the ground.
Yeah, this one was like on the open bleeding
Mm.
wound.
So yeah.
But you can't. There are opportunities to do some maintenance pruning on trees. Especially established trees,
Yeah.
kind of all
Right.
year round. You don't maybe
Yeah.
want to do it right before they go into dormancy, but
Yeah.
so especially species like, I think, like dogwoods and maples tend to bleed quite a
Birches.
bit,
Yeah.
and so that's just another thing to, if you're trying to prune something, and space it out and not taking too much out all at once.
Mhm.
And there's another kind of principle, but we might
Yeah,
have
like
mentioned that,
it's
but
like stressful. I guess another thing to really mention is that when you are pruning, a rule of thumb for your cuts is they should be very clean across the board.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's all kinds of other principles with pruning
Yeah.
of
Oh yeah, the bonsai
relative to the
guy.
collar, and yeah.
It's like I want to have a pruning podcast, but it's also really hard because you need to be able to show the photos of, like, this is what, a branch collar looks like. And, this is the structure that you might want to
Mhm.
look for in a peach tree and that kind of stuff. So
When
call your
yeah.
extension office.
Yeah.
One of the things to just keep in mind with plants, and I'm going to simplify this, a lot of biological principles kind of distilled down into kind of a couple simple statements. But the more you prune, the more response from that plant you're going to have. Just keep
Yeah.
that in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that you prune could cause trouble down the road, especially if you're just indiscriminately heading back limbs to a non-growing point. You're going to have a lot of death, down to growing points. Not only that, but if you're pruning more, I don't know, it's called the rule of thirds, but if you're pruning a lot on a plant, it's sensing danger, and it's going to want to make more limbs, which are
Mhm.
essentially energy factories. And where you pruned out one limb, if you're not careful, you're going to have 5 next year in some cases. So you're going to
Totally.
make more work for yourself. So the answer to that is to use proper pruning, kind of cuts, first of all.
Yeah.
But the second thing is to prune incrementally. That if you're, for instance, if you're trying to bring an old apple tree back into production, you don't do that all at once. You do it over the course of 3 to 5 years in stages, so that you don't set off this trigger within the plant to produce a bunch of excess limbs.
Yeah.
So
And I
just kind
like
of keep
that.
that in mind.
I like that rule of three, or that not taking a third more. And it's important. I've always understood it to mean that the the third that you're talking about taking has to do with the surface area of the leaves, right?
Yes,
So not so much the
basically.
volume of
Yeah.
the volume of the wood itself, but like where is the energy coming
Yeah.
from, and
Yes.
don't take a third more than a third of the solar panels away.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you get this response that the plant goes into emergency mode, basically.
Yeah.
There's been significant physiological changes to the plant. And the plant's like, oh no.
Panic, panic, panic.
Yes. The
Right.
red button that
Water
says
sprouts
don't panic.
everywhere.
Yes. Water
Mm-hmm.
sprouts. That's exactly it, Josh. Yeah. What else is going on? I'm trying to think of the things. Alexis, what are you dividing around your home, or are you moving anything this time of year? Or have you already done that?
I'm not really moving things unless I have to. So, like I said,
Yeah.
I might move those things where I really need to renovate bed areas. But other
Yeah.
than that, like if you're not doing that, getting some of those weeds out. One thing I have convinced myself of is if you are stressed about the henbit and dead nettle and some of these cool season weeds, chickweed, are they the worst thing? Because I have settled into no. And here's my reason why. They're usually dead and they're dormant. They're gone by the time most of that crop is blooming. So they're going to be,
Mhm.
more summer bloomers, fall bloomers. So that henbit, that chickweed is already done. And are they almost acting like a living mulch to prevent some of those worse summer weeds that are more competing? A lot of the time,
Mhm.
these weeds are shallow rooted. So, I think pick and choose your battles, and sometimes you have to when you're doing large scale. But even if you're a homeowner, right, you're probably working, you got a bunch of other stuff to do. So pick and choose your battles. Like, yes, get out some of those perennial weeds that really can affect and steal nutrients and water from your plants, like clover. If in your beds, and this is the time clover is bad. Dandelions have a big taproot. They're not necessarily ideal. I can have them in my lawn for me, but I don't necessarily fight that battle anymore. I feel like there's more important ones sometimes. So just I want to give everybody like permission, not that you need my permission, but maybe it will be helpful if from hear it from me and give yourself some permission to like let some things be okay
Right.
and think of them as something that's benefiting, maybe you, or at least benefiting some of the pollinators or something in your area.
Well, you bring up something that maybe we should kind of define or make sure to admit, like what is the horticultural definition of a weed, right?
Any plant in a place it's not supposed to be.
Right. And
Preference.
that is
Preference.
defined by the person kind of managing that space.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the benefits of that kind of understanding, or maybe even ecological training, is that you can not do something to a place, and as long as you can interpret it as intentional, then it makes sense. It's
It's
not
part of your
neglect, it's a
plan.
deeply ecological practice, right? I'm on like a 100-year plan for my lawn, and
I saw
this is
this
what it looks like.
A
I saw
natural
this funny
succession.
like meme cartoon thing, and it was like a person, and they were pointing towards like, their garden and how it hadn't been cut back and maintained, and she's like, I'm leaving this for the pollinators. And then there's the dandelions in the yard, and she's like, I'm leaving these for the pollinators, right? And everybody's good. And then there flashes to her inside with the laundry, and it's like a pile of laundry, and she's like, I'm leaving this for the pollinators. And I feel like that is me in a nutshell.
Right.
One of our turf specialists had this shirt, and he loved showing the graphic too. Said, "I fought the lawn, and the lawn won." I guess that's being in a
Yeah.
situation where expectations don't meet reality. So it's
Yeah.
whatever your expectations are.
It's
folks.
working with nature, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
you can spend a lot of time.
Any
and money.
final thoughts? Because I have something I want to share with you all really quick.
You should share.
Yeah. So I was just looking at our schedule, and I realized we've done over, at this point, we didn't recognize it when it happened, but over 52 episodes.
Whoa.
Which means that we've been podcasting for a year. So happy birthday. Congratulations. We've made it this far.
Woot,
I feel
woot.
like that. I feel like that's a celebratory
Yeah.
thing.
It is.
I was told
Everyone
there
was
would be cake.
Where is there not cupcakes?
Okay,
There's
but
no
there. I mean,
cupcakes.
actually, there are cupcakes here, but they're
They're for you.
We're all remote. Just for listeners, let me clarify something. We are remote for most of these episodes, so
Yes.
Alexis is having all the cupcakes for herself.
Yes.
BYOCC.
Bring
Yes.
your own cupcakes. But
We'll
yeah,
bring
so
our
if
own.
you've been with us since the beginning, thank you for being here with us. We have certainly enjoyed our time, and I know when I have this scheduled in my calendar, even though I'm not in person with these wonderful gentlemen, it brightens my day, and it makes sometimes when you're having a hard day, it's nice to have a good laugh with them. So thank you all for doing this with me, and thank you, listeners. And if you've not been with us since the beginning, we hope that you go back and you find that we were just as funny a year ago as we are now. But
Totally.
yeah. Any other thoughts before we wrap this baby up? No? Everybody's shaking their head no?
No
Awesome.
thoughts.
I think
Only
we're good.
vibes.
No good vibes. I expected them from Brett because he's the heart of this.
I would say, think hard about what brings you joy in your spaces around you with plants, and if that's grass, or if that's some perennials, or if that's some fruit trees or something else, then do that, and do it in a way that makes you happy and makes the people around you happy. The number of people who comment on our bulbs and other things that we have out front makes me really, people just walking by, walking their dogs or whatever, next door neighbor saying that it smells nice. I don't know. I just think that that's part of what it's all about. And so
it's a community. Yeah.
do what makes you happy. And we're here to support that as much as we can.
Yes. And if you want a turf lawn, you can absolutely contact me, and I will absolutely help you to do whatever makes you happy. I will try and convince you about other things. But I will help you. No, just kidding. But anyways, thank you guys for being here with us today and enjoying it. You can follow us on Instagram at Hortculture. If you wanted to send us a message on there about good episodes that you would like to hear, feel free to do that. You can also shoot us an email. You can find that in the show notes, and we all receive that email at the exact same time. And so we usually try and share, one of us will respond to you and let you know, but we have all seen it, and we are mutually saying, wow, what a great idea. We will add that to the list. So thank you all for those. We hope that you will leave us a review. If you are enjoying this, feel free to put your, what you want to hear in there as well after you give us that 5-star review, because you love us so much. And go back and listen to any of those episodes over the past year plus at this point. And yeah, so we hope that as we grow this podcast, you will grow with us and that you will join us next time. Thanks, y'all.